The People's Republic of China is one of the world's largest countries, surpassed in size only by Russia and Canada. China is also the world's most populous country, with almost 1.4 billion people. According to the Pew Research Center, the second largest group of American immigrants immigrated from China, surpassed only by Mexico. Asian immigrants are also projected to be the largest population of American immigrants by 2055. This video will give teachers a basic understanding of Chinese culture, as well as give suggestions for culturally responsive teaching practices. China has over 3.5 million square miles of land, covering about 1/14 of all the land on Earth. China directly borders 14 countries and faces South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines.
As would be expected of a country with China's size, China contains many extremes and variances. The climate varies greatly. China has the greatest contrast between the temperature of its northern border and its southern border of any country in the entire world. China has both the highest and one of the lowest places on Earth. China has both densely populated cities and rural villages. For the 2017-2018 school year, Kentucky had 520 English learners who spoke a Chinese language, which translates to about 1.8% of all English learners in Kentucky. The largest volume of these learners spoke Mandarin, though Cantonese and Hakka were represented as well. Other languages may be spoken as well, since many Chinese speakers were not specified on the survey. This brings up an interesting fact. While Chinese languages are often referred to as dialects, most scholars classify them as separate languages, as they are often mutually unintelligible, which means speakers of each cannot easily understand each other without special effort. For example, Wu only has about a 31% lexical similarity with Mandarin, which is about the same amount English and French share. It is incredibly important for teachers to clarify which Chinese language their students speak. The most spoken languages are Mandarin, Wu, Mian, Gan, Hakka, Xiang, and Cantonese. China has some of the earliest written records and boasts the longest continuously recorded history of any country, spanning over 4,000 years. Teachers of Chinese immigrant students should further explore China's incredible history. Encyclopedia Britannica has an extended article on the history of China, and there are many credible YouTube videos that attempt to provide a quick overview of China's expansive history. Education is incredibly important in the Chinese family. Many families pay for tutors for their children. Children are expected to bring home A's and may be harshly punished if they do not perform exceptionally well in school. Rather than engaging in extracurricular activities, Chinese families prefer to have their children study, learn to play instruments, or engage in other intellectual pursuits. Because of China's longtime one-child policy, active from 1979 to 2015, parents often poured all of their resources and expectations onto their only child. This often resulted in undue pressure upon children to the extent that the government had to issue statements encouraging families not to put so much pressure on their children. Depression, anxiety, and even suicide are not uncommon. Religion in China is highly complicated. China is officially an atheist country to this day. In 1949, China became officially atheist and the government fiercely cracked down on all religious activities. Today, religious restrictions have been relaxed, though the government only allows government-sanctioned churches to operate out in the open. While the government boasts of religious freedom, many are quick to note that China does not have true religious freedom. Nonetheless, about 22% of the population adheres to folk religions, such as ancestor worship, 18% to Buddhism, 5% to Christianity, and 2% to Islam. Recommendations and culturally responsive teaching practices. What is cultural responsivity, and how can teachers ensure their schools and classrooms are culturally responsive? According to Diaz, Rico, and Weed, a culturally responsive school will do 4 things: respect student diversity, adapt and work with students around conflicting cultural values, hold high expectations for all students, and gather parental and community support for the school and education. Culturally responsive educators recognize that cultures have diverse practices and values that affect schooling and attitudes toward schooling. Educators should be accommodating and adapt instruction whenever necessary. Every culture has their own norms for what is acceptable and standard practice in everything from school rituals and the role of the school to hygiene and medicine. Some cultural values may conflict with the values that are espoused in traditional U.S. classrooms. For example, most American classrooms foster competition, which is contrary to the collectivist culture, which emphasizes the group above the individual. About 70% of the world's population lives in a collectivist culture, including Asians and some Arab groups. Culturally conflicting values can also be found in questioning practices, which refers to why teachers ask questions and the responses they are looking for. The role of silence. Is it respectful or does it reflect discomfort? And discourse styles, or how people take turns in a conversation. Teachers should hold high expectations for all students. They should be careful not to water down the curriculum for English learners, but rather to make the content accessible. Finally, teachers should work with the school to foster parental involvement and community support. It is so important to involve parents in the educational process, but teachers should recognize that not all cultures normalize parental involvement. It's also important to be cognizant of factors that restrict possible parental involvement, such as parent-teacher conference scheduling during the school day, especially when the school has communicated that siblings are unwelcome. Finally, a few more helpful tips and practices. Take the time to fill out a student biography or profile card. This means gathering information about the student's sociocultural background, their acculturation level, the student's L1 proficiency level in reading and writing, the student's L2, or in this case English, level in the domains of reading, writing, listening, and speaking, as well as information about the student's prior educational experiences. It can also be very useful to learn about your students' learning styles, family values towards education, and even examine the school and community's views of your students' L1. All of these can affect student learning. It is incredibly important to learn how to pronounce your students' names. Please ensure you are correctly pronouncing all students' names. If you aren't easily able to pronounce the student's name, write down a phonetic pronunciation guide and practice saying the name until you are confident in your pronunciation. For more information about pronouncing names and why it's so incredibly important, check out the My Name, My Identity campaign.